Start recording. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. We ended yesterday's session with, and in fact, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I think for the first time, I don't know if it was the first time, but it's certainly one of the only times. It wasn't the first time. For the first time, I should. For one of the few times, let's hedge our bets, I couldn't remember. I was like, I know I ended yesterday's stream with something that I wanted to do, and I could not remember what it was. It's been a rough day, I don't mind telling you. So my brain was a little fried. So I looked back and on the pre-stream, I went back and looked at the very end, and thank you to Miblo, who, of course, keeps meticulous notes in the episode guide. I was able to just quickly scan back and look like, oh, right, that's what it was. It was the ability to manually specify overrides to the sort order in some convenient way in the user level code that the renderer can then follow. So that's what I want to do today. I sketched out a way we could make it work yesterday, and so today, let's see if we can do it. Today is day 312, so day 311 source code is what you want to start with today. And that's what I'm working on right now. So if you start with that, you're at the same place in the code base as I am. So anyway, let's go ahead and look at what it is that I am concerned about. So we got our sorting stuff working, and we have the ability to do specific sort stuff. And everything is working basically the way that I want it to so far for a single region, single room. And so we're going to have to do a little playing around once we get the Z correct to make sure that these guys work correctly. Because right now, these are a little bit weird because of the fact that they're still being scaled in proportion. They're not supposed to be. So we've got, once we fix the Z stuff, we'll have to take a look at the stairs and possibly tweak the sort rules a little and make sure that they're okay. But everything else is working roughly the way that I wanted it to work. And we currently have one situation which I would like the ability to manually override. And that is that if you take a look at what happens with the head on top of the body of the hero, you'll notice that because the body is two segments at the moment, well, three really, the shadow included. And they always sort in the correct order because I manually specified their order, right? And we added the capability to do that with those aggregate sort keys, and it seems to work pretty well. But the head is a separate entity. And so the problem that we have is, since the head is a separate entity, we need some way of saying, hey, this and the body are supposed to sort in a specific order, and we need some way of specifying that even though we're in two totally separate systems, right? So we're trying to pass this information down to the sorter. The sorter has no idea what the head and the body are, right? It just sees a bunch of sprites. So it needs some way of correlating. Basically, a thing, when the head goes to render, it needs a way to say, I'm in front of the body somehow. Now, the problem that we have here is that if you take a look at this, if you take a look at how this works, we currently don't have that ability. And so when the head moves, you can see that the body will flash through as the head gets far enough back in Y to be behind where the body is, right? And there's really no way we're ever going to fix that. It's not a sorting bug in the sense of it doing the wrong thing for the definition of our sort. It's actually sorting those two things correctly. But the problem is our semantic desire, our artistic desire, of how we want those things sorted simply doesn't match where the objects actually are in the world, right? Those are Y sprites, and the head is actually behind the body once it kind of moves back like this. And so at some point it crosses over that boundary. So we need some way of making that not happen. And so what I need to do is get that information down to the renderer during the sort. And so that's what I'd like to take a look at doing now. Okay. So what I suggested, and there's a little, it's not completely a sure thing yet, but what I suggested was we could have the renderer keep a little table that allows you to do some edge specification in it. And in that edge specification, you can simply tag things and say, you know what, we're going to say that there's some number of special objects, and we're going to tag those objects with some ID. Like we'll just say, you know, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 4 or 5, whatever, right? We'll tag the objects with those IDs as we write them, and then they'll go into a table at sort time based on that idea. Then, you know, when the sort needs to sort, it can just go through the manual edges and look at those IDs, pull out which objects those actually are in the table, and go. Now, it's a little hackneyed and stringy, right? There's just a lot of bookkeeping there. But my assumption is that it's probably okay because we don't have to do it for every sprite, right? Like, it only has to happen for multi-element objects that have a defined sort order. So it seems like the kind of thing that's not that critical, right? It's not going to be done on thousands of entities every frame, so I'm hoping that it's the kind of thing that doesn't really create that kind of a problem, if that makes sense. So yeah. So if we take a look here, let's see. So if we take a look here, we have in our sort sprite bound, we had this idea of the debug tag. I guess what I'm saying is the debug tag could actually become, you know, essentially a real tag for all intents and purposes, right? Oh, and I should mention, since we're doing this at a time when we're creating something in the render list, one of these can actually just be an actual offset, can actually point directly at the sprite bound. So really, it's only one side of the table that actually needs this. So the hard part of this is going to be over in world mode, I believe, anyway. And I always do this, actually entity. I seem to never be able to remember that we moved this code into a separate file. So you can see here where we do our begin aggregate sort key and our end aggregate sort key to do our piece rendering. And by the way, I suppose one thing that I probably should do is just say, hey, if the piece count is greater than 1, do this. But there's really no need to trouble the renderer in aggregating a sort key if there isn't actually more than one thing, right? So that seems like a pretty sane thing to do as well, just to prevent the renderer from having to do any work there. Anyway, so here we've got our loop, and the problem is when we do this end aggregate sort key bit here, I want to be able to add an edge at this point. And I want to be able to add an edge to the thing that I'm on top of if I'm on top of something special, right? If I'm in front of something special. And you can see why this is a little bit tricky because we're just an entity in the world and we don't really know who our paired entity is in this case. Like, we don't really have a good idea of who that might be. Now, fortunately, because our system is actually pretty flexible at this point, we haven't really pushed on it much. But you'll notice that we can find brains by ID if we need to, right? I believe we have the capability to look up a brain by ID, and let me just verify that that's true. But you know, in SimRegion, we have to put stuff into brains, and we have to do that in a quick, quickly, right? We have to do that in a speedy fashion. So you can see here, when we come through and we do, no, not move entity, we can see right here. There we go. When we come through here, you can see that we have our brain idea. We do a get or add brain call. When we do that get or add brain call, you can see that we've got sort of the ability to deal with the brains at that point. So what that means is that if we needed to, we certainly could have a way to look it up in here for special purpose sort stuff. We could certainly make that happen in here. Now, I don't know that that's the best way to do it because since our entity struct, like, you know, I guess what I'm saying is one way I could do it is right in here, I could just go grab my brain if I'm ahead, go look at the body and be done, right? But the way that we sort of set up this system it feels to me a little more proper to say, well, in the brain code, the idea is to have a large flexible entity, sort of flat entity format, right, that we were working with that's giant, that kind of does a decompressed stream sort of thing into it. And what seems to be a little more sensible to me is just having in there a thing that's like who I would be on top of, what entity I would be on top of, or something like that. Having that value in there seems like a much saner way to go, right? That seems like the easiest idea. So it seems to me that what we would want to do is inside Handmade Brain, when we're in the hero code, if we could just have some concept in here that we've got something like, some kind of thing like that, where we have manual sort in front of, and we can just write into there, the brain can write into that, and specify something for that. If that makes sense. So I think that's probably the saner way to do it. And so then in here where we have, the type brain hero, when it's doing all of our hero processing, in the case where we know that we have a body and a head, so you can see like, if we wanted to put one in here, we could just say like, oh, okay, if we have a head and a body, right, then I want to tell the head that it's in front of whatever the body's entity ID is, or something like this, right? And so, something like this. Does this make sense? So basically, when we come through, we would say, okay, when we have a head and a body that are linked together, I know that I always want the head to be on top of the body, and in the future, this could get even more complicated, right? It could be like, check that we are attached as well, e.g. not floating head. So, we can also have other criteria here. We can break this if the head is a free floating head, not attached to the body, which we could easily do, right? So in this case, where we have the head and the body, and we assume they're attached, like in the future, like I said, if we want to support detachment, then we want to say reserve a special sort key somehow that says that the body, when it gets sorted, will get that tag, right? It'll be able to say this is a special sort key that's going to be important, that can announce it to the renderer, and then the head can have that information of, oh, okay, I'm a sort, I have someone I'm supposed to sort in front of, and this is who that is, right? And what's interesting is these are not really supposed to be stored. So, when we actually start doing our packing and unpacking there, that's the kind of thing that we would not actually want to store. And, I suppose we could also do something like this, and inside the sim, the thing that does the pack down, we could make sure that we don't actually use them ever by when we do pack entity into chunk. Where is our unpack? Where is our unpack? Sim region. Yeah. When we do our unpack here, which I guess would be here, get hash ID, region, sim region. This could be the decompression step. So right here, we can zero these out just to enforce the fact that they can't persist across a frame. right? Which I don't really want them to. Why did I type that wrong? I don't know. All right. So let's keep going here. So what this means is that the brain, even though it really doesn't need it for anything else yet, is going to have it is going to need a way to talk to the render group because it now has something to say. Before it didn't, right? So before those two things didn't have to be connected in any way. So when I called execute brain, I wasn't actually ever passing a render group in, even though I could have, right? We're at a point in the code where it's configured up and proper, so it's not a problem, but I just generally don't pass things if they're not needed, right? So I'll go ahead and pass it now that it is needed, yeah, I guess I'll pass it after the input. It seems like a reasonable place. And I'll say that this is the render group. Reserve sort key we haven't implemented yet. This is, of course, spelled wrong. And so really what we need to do now is just have a notion of that reserve sort key somehow, which we'll deal with in a second. So then when I come through here, you know, how would I use this? And you'll notice I'm kind of doing usage code in the order in which I think I understand it best, from best to least. Of course, I'm always in the wrong file. Should just move this back there. I always think it's there for some reason. So in here, you know, when we do end aggregate sort key, I'm trying to think of where I really want to do this. I think what I want to do is say, well, whatever the last piece index is that we do, I want to, you know, they're going to render sort of in that order. And so let me just double check this here. So if I go to world mode and I go to hero, or add player rather. So in add player, you can see that we do cape, torso, shadow. And so like 0 is sort of the most important part of the entity. And in fact, if we kind of look down here at the pieces, we could even note, hey, 0 is the on top piece. So n is the on bottom. So we know that the first one we push is the one that we would want to make a specification about as far as being if something was on top of it, right? So that's the one that we would want to associate with the reserved sort key. And then if we're talking about the person who wants to be on top of another thing, then that one presumably is just going to be based on the aggregate sort key, right? But I guess in either case, it's really the 0th person. The question is just, did we aggregate the sort key or not? Now, one thing that's annoying is, like I said, I feel like we don't want to force aggregation in the case where there's only one thing. But the problem is, this would kind of be the natural place to put the piece of information that I'm talking about, it would seem. So, yeah. Not really sure what I want to do about that. I say. Well, I guess let me look to see what actually is going to happen inside the render group code for this to work properly. And maybe by switching to the other side of the problem, it will become clear how that wants to flow down. And then that'll specify the other side for me. So I'm just trying to like ping pong back and forth between the two sides of the problem, and to make them meet in the middle in a good place. All right, so when we do the sprite graph here, so this is the code for build sprite graph. Obviously, it goes through and it does all the grid checking. And at this point, after all the grid checking is done, we have edges between all of the nodes that we know we want edges between, right? But now what I need to do is add some additional edges in that force sorts in a particular order. And so, yeah, I guess the question is, how do I do that in a clean way? I think the answer is that since there are a low number of manually specified edges, what we probably would want to do is let this create all the edges exactly as it has. And then, you know, in here, we would probably want to do some kind of a for I loop, right? Where we said something like, oh. Wait a minute. Am I making this more complicated than it needs to be? You know, I think I am. I think I might be drastically overcomplicating this now that I think about it. So here's a question for you. Suppose that we just look at is in front of. We know that we have a sprite bound A and a sprite bound B. If we wanted to, couldn't we just do something like inside the sort sprite bound, there's like, I don't know, some kind of a sort code or something where I just say like, okay, I've got some of these. I could even have it be a pointer probably, or an offset. Let me just explain to you what I'm thinking. I don't know why, I don't know how I didn't think of this before. Is there something wrong with it? It just seems so obvious. I'm not sure why I didn't think of it before. All right, so basically we're gonna end up testing the head against the body. If they overlap, we're gonna test them. If they don't overlap, we don't care, right? So if the head's over here and the body's over here, then nobody cares. We're never gonna need to know who's behind who because they're never gonna need to get sorted relative to each other. So we know that we're in this scenario. So we know that we're calling is in front of, right? And we have both of these sort keys. So why don't we just put something in the sort key where you can tag each of these with the always behind, always in front code, where if those match up, that's the sort. In fact, the simplest version of this, right, is real simple. You can imagine saying like, oh, okay, you know, I've got a U16, maybe another U16 here, something like this, where it's like always in front of and always behind, right? And you could just do something here where you just say like, okay, if these two things match on you, if my always in front of matches your always behind, we're done. So for example, we could just say B32 results if if A's always in front of is greater than 0, right? And A always in front of equals B always in front of, then the result is true. Otherwise, we do the comparison, right? So in this case, and I guess that needs to be inside sprite bound. So technically that's here, right? So basically that's saying you can have 65,000 pairs of things that can have a sort rule between them. And you can't have more than one per thing. Now we could have more here. We could, make some more if we wanted to, but we'll see if that gets how far that gets us. But if you take a look at how this works, we just say, oh, okay. Now we just say, well, when you render the head, just set its always in front of to be some code, and the always behind one gets the same code. That's it. I think that's the entirety of it, right? I mean, I think that might literally be the complete solution to the problem. And it's a little less flexible than being able to manually specify edges, but I mean, the amount of complexity savings you get from that seems crazy huge. So now, really all that happens is you would just say, always in front of, always behind. Oops. Now it's trivial. You just say reserve sort key, you get one back, you render as you normally would, and you just have to specify that always behind and always in front of, and that's it. So that seems like way better than what I was saying. So yeah, I think I may have gone down a stupid path there. I was definitely making a system that was a lot more than what I think I would have needed. So I'm glad I thought of that. I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier. Anyway, so if we go out to platform, since this operates at sort level, we just have a thing here which is going to be a manual sort key count or something like this, or next available. Let's see, last used manual sort key, something like that. And so reserve sort key is like a really trivial function now that doesn't do anything even remotely complicated. It's just going to do assert. Let me get the commands out here though. It's going to say, all right, whatever this guy was, assert that the last used manual sort key is less than int 16 maximum. Do we have that defined? There it is. So it doesn't look like we ever did. So I'm going to say U16 maximum 65535. As long as there's room, right? As long as I'm not going to overflow, then last use manual sort key is all good. Assuming that it starts at 0, I want to use the the post incremented value of it. So the first one I give out will be 1, since 0 means don't bother doing this sort, right? Don't do a more complex sort on this guy. So I would say the result equals the U16 of that, and then I return it. So now I have allocated those. I'm good to go. And I just have to change these to do like always in front of, always behind. and the corresponding inside the sim region. And off we go. Now, oh, that's good. Define. So now, I think we're pretty much good to go. We just have to actually use this. Let's see here. Is in front of return result. Thank you for catching that, Mr. Compiler. I always blame the compiler when it does something wrong, so I feel like it's good to thank the compiler when it does something right. All right, so now we're all good. We just have to actually put that value in somehow, right? We have to get that into the actual renderer somehow. And so when we're doing that, what we want to do here is, I think when we do these push bitmaps, we want to make sure that somehow that information flows. Now, I believe the object transform that's set here might be the right place to do it. So entity transform always in front of, maybe equals entity always in front of, and entity transform always behind, maybe equals entity, always behind, something like this. And what I need to do there is go like, okay, the object transform, since that's the thing that I'm passing down inside render group, I just need a place where those are going to live, and then I'll just copy them into the sort key as we go. So here's that object transform, always in front of, always behind. And you can see that those things kind of form a pair all the time. So the other thing that does kind of seem possibly likely is that they should be bundled, right? So it's possible that it should be something like manual sort pair. Or manual sort key, I don't know. Something like that. Yeah. So at that point, we could also say that inside the renderer, instead of those, maybe we've got, and maybe I stick that in here. And now, every time for this object transform inside the render group, when we do, I think there's, what is there? There's like a default one in here somewhere, or I'm not sure what that actually does. Default, there we go. So in these cases, they'll just get cleared to 0, which is what we want. And then when we actually go to push somebody on here, where we do our, our sort key stuff, we do sort key. Whenever these sort keys are being made, which I believe, don't we have a get sort key for compute sort key? Oh, that's okay. I don't know what that is. That was pretty funny. We have a thing that does the sort keys here somewhere. Where is it? Get bound for. There it is. So this guy right here, when it computes the sprite bounds, now it can also take whatever the one that was in the object transform and just copy it, right? So the sprite bound manual is going to equal the object transforms manual, what do I call it? Sort. Okay. So yeah, I think also we could probably get rid of sort bias at that point and use this manual sort key for that. Okay, that's separate though. Anyway, so yeah, now that we have that happening, the manual sort just works, I think, at this point, because that'll get copied in and set. So now we just have to go through and make sure I didn't mess anything up, which I probably did, but let's find out. Okay. Oops, did I make those too big? And I wonder if I could do just this. Okay. Yeah, and I need that to actually be sort of visible to everybody, so that may have to be something that kind of moves out, I don't know, maybe here? I really hate this aspect of C and C++. It's the worst. Other languages, well, I don't know, maybe some do, but it's just stupid that you have to care where things go. Files should be for your benefit, not for the compiler's benefit, you know? I should be able to put the sort key where it makes most linguistic sense for me to have it and look at it. And that is not what happens at all. Okay. So yeah. I think we're just about done. Is it just, I think it's just manual in that case. All right. So now in theory, these things are getting marked. We did do a bunch of changes there, so this is probably not quite correct. But hey, we should be able to now go do some debugging. I don't know if I can... Well, I think I might be able to. I think I just have to trap... Or there we go. I'm like, I got to get these sorting in the wrong order first so I can watch it happen. But yeah, that's what we need right there. So the idea is that shouldn't really happen. So we want the ability to force the head to still be on top, even in that situation, right? That's the goal here. Okay, so let's take a look at the code in Handmade entity. Where is that? Or actually, I guess in the brain first, in Handmade brain. Let's see whether we're setting this correctly in the first place, because that's the first step of this process, is this guy, when he comes through here and decides that he's got both a head and a body, he's got to set the sort key. And he's going to sort the always behind and always in front of keys at this point. All right. So we go in here to reserve, and this should be 0 because this is the only person who ever calls this, right? So the result should be 1, and it is. So off we go. Then we do a bunch of stuff, and really I guess the next thing that I wanted to see was in the actual sort. I want to see if we ever hit that case, or if I never actually do. So let's take a look at is in front of here. And I want to see if we get here. So the answer is we're not getting there. All right, so let's test another thing. I guess I could have used live code reloading, so I'm not sure why I probably shouldn't have closed. It's a force of habit. So when I'm in the entity code and I set this entity transform manual sort here, I'm going to do a thing here to say, well, all right, in the case where the manual sort always behind is not equal to 0, this way I can zero in on just entities that have that set, which should only be 2 of them, right? Okay, so now we should go into entity, bloop. Okay. So at least now I can verify that we are in fact passing some of it down. And so manual sort says always in front of is 1, right? That's what's going on here. So presumably this entity, if it's always in front of number 1, this must be the head. And you know, we've got brain slot 0 on brain ID 1. Let's see if that corresponds to what we think it should be. Zero. Oh, sorry, it's type in index 0 and 0 and 0. Yes, so that's correct. That is the head. So that got set properly. When we come through here, let's take a quick look at what happens when we actually push the bitmap. Here goes the push. So we're going to get it. We're going to push it on, get the dimensions, finally push it as a render element. Here comes the push, and we're going to, I guess it's that sort key that I need to look at. Does it have it in there? So it did. So the sort key is set correctly now, right? At least on that guy. Let's see about the other guy. This one should be always behind. Yep, always behind 1. So current, yeah. So here we go on to push bitmap. And all right. So I've determined that I do in fact have those values set properly. So going into the sort, in theory, we have the correct data. In theory, anyway. Oh, so it looks like I just have a typo there. Maybe that's our only bug. Wouldn't that be nice? This is just supposed to be always behind, right? If that's our only bug, I will be a very happy camper, in fact. Nope, not our only bug. Okay, stay there, Mr. Familiar. Okay, there we go. All right, so going into the sort, I guess what I could do is see whether I'm ever hitting this case separately. I guess I could do like right. So this way I could check to see if either of them oh, you know what I just realized? I have to check it both ways, don't I? So I would have to say if A is always in front of B, and I'd also have to say if B was always in front of A, right? Like that kind of thing. So it's really more like this. I think that's more what we're looking for. So I'd have to say, all right, when I compare these two things, if I have a condition where I know that See, I also need to know whether they're... I wish there was a way to make it so that they never could be... Oh. I guess I could just make it so that they never do equal. So since I'm doing this comparison, I could just make it so the default case, instead of being 0, is a different case where they're not always going to be equal. That's kind of complicated. Let's see if we can make that work. All right, so can we do something like this? If the always in front of equals the always behind, then it's true. If the always in front of in the other order equals the always behind, and I guess I could leave A in the same position here just so it's a little easier to read. If I'm always in front of this guy, it's true. If I'm always behind him, it's false. Otherwise, we do the actual operation. So in that case, what I would need to do is make it so that there's not a 0. It's not zeros there. In the case where it's not supposed to be doing anything. So for example, if you're just doing sort of a cleared one of these, and I don't know that this is the best way to do this, but you know, if you imagine saying that always in front of is 0 and always behind is the maximum value, those would never compare, right? Those would never be equal for anybody. So that would prevent the bug. That would prevent the false case. But I don't know. I think maybe it's better to just do the extra check. I'm not sure. I really don't. I like clear to 0 is very important. I find that it prevents a lot of errors, so I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and just stick with what I had before temporarily, and we'll see if we have to do something else. All right. So now we're in a better situation, I think. Oh, and hey, look, it fixed the bug. So yeah, that is, and right at the 5-minute warning. That is what I wanted to have happen. Now we added a little extra complexity to our sort. Oh, wait, no. I still got, there was a little, it glitched a little bit there. Is that why? Is that because they weren't quite overlapping? One thing that I don't know is how our bounds, let's see here. I know I saw it. Yeah, like right there. Hilariously, eventually, those sprites get behind the actual wall. I think I need to go fix... I need to actually fix those sprite bounds so we'll have something real to play with. I definitely saw it glitch. There we go. It's weird though, it's very... There it is. I'm not sure I know how that's happening. It's really weird that it only happens just in transit and I can't hold it. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's really weird. I mean, I suppose one thing that can be happening there is if the sort graph is doing something weird. Wait a minute, let me see here. We need to finish this part so we can have this up on top. I don't remember if this is actually valid or not. Yeah, it's very strange. It doesn't seem to be very consistent, which is odd. I think we must have a bug in there. Because you would think that if it was something to do with sort orders, you would be able to make it happen fairly reliably, but I can't. Right? But it was definitely happening. So it's got a bug, but the bug may be not what I would expect it to be. There we go. So, yeah, I mean, one of the problems with having this much stuff on the screen is like looking at that crazy amount of stuff that has to get sorted in order for this to happen. You know, but you can see there it's picking the incorrect sort order. So I guess in this case I could go see if we ever actually hit those cases. So maybe it's just so I can see whether or not the problem is that they're just never occurring. So it definitely knows. So it's a case of a cycle. And you know what? It is in a cycle set, isn't it? You can see that it's brightened itself up. So I wonder if that only happens when it's in a cycle. Because see here, we're not in a cycle. Now we're in a cycle and it's wrong. Okay. So that cycle detection is actually pretty handy, isn't it? We can see immediately that it happens specifically when we're in a cycle. So that's okay. We can sort of defer that for a little while until we get some real sprites in here and see to what extent, when the bounds are correct, how often we get those cycles. But at least now we know that there is a concrete explanation for why we're getting that incorrect sort. Thank you, Mr. Cycle Detection. Okay. All right, Q&A. We could do some Q&A. Yeah, I mean, I think the Sizik, I think the key is never break a cycle in the front behind pair. Like, that's not an okay place to break the cycle. Like, that always needs to be part of the sort, you know? Another quiet day on the Handmade Hero frontier. Well, since there are no questions, I can take this long question, which is not really on topic, but... oh, well, okay, sorry, someone just put in a question from... that is on topic. Will there ever be a case when the character's facing direction will change what we want for the sort order? I can think of a possible case if the characters had arms. Does the current method take these cases into account? Yeah, I think this one, since the brain is the thing that can specify out those sort orders, it knows all that stuff. So it knows the facing direction, it knows whether the head and the body are attached, it knows whether there's a glove there, it knows everything. So it should be the case that we can have complete flexibility to switch mandatory sort rules based on game state. We don't have to hard code it like, oh, this character is always sorted this way. So that's kind of cool. Miblo says, looking forward to rewatching that simplification from early on. I don't think I quite followed that live. So Miblo, I realized that I was thinking about it the wrong way. I was thinking, we have a sort graph. I need a way of conveying to the renderer that there are edges in this sort graph that I want it to add. But that was the wrong way to think about it. Instead, what I should have thought about, or what I then did think about, was we always do this comparison is in front of to generate the edges at sort time. So all I really need to do is modify that test so that I can tweak the sort keys with special pairing information so that when two things get compared that have to have a specific sort order, they, will sort in the proper order. So it basically just, I forced the is in front of to do the work so that it will generate the right edges rather than trying to pass the edges down. That's all. All right, so now on to the long question. I'm the communications director at a game development studio in Montreal. I haven't been to Montreal since I was like 12 or something, or 14. How old was I? 14, 15? I could have been as old as 16. We went on a skiing trip. I grew up in Massachusetts. It wasn't that far away. I just found your stream minutes ago, and it's very fascinating. Oh, thank you. Your trailer seems to convey the idea that a game is better if it's entirely handmade from scratch. Do you feel a game can't be made with as much love if it uses a pre-made engine as opposed to one that's made entirely from scratch? Do you not feel like reinventing the wheel may be a waste of time? So I guess there's two parts to that question. And the first part is the trailer conveying the idea that the game is better if it's entirely handmade from scratch. And do I feel like a game can't be made with much love if it's used a pre-made engine as opposed to one that's made entirely from scratch? And what I would say is, I don't think that a game can't be made with as much love if it uses a pre-made engine. Because I don't think that necessarily the approach to the game development precludes how much love there is in the development. I think probably, certain things don't go hand in hand with love. So if your primary goal is to make money, then you aren't making a game with very much love. That's kind of just obvious, right? So there's certain things about the sort of exterior part of making a game that could mean that you aren't going to make it with very much love. But I don't think your choice is whether to use a pre-made engine or using your own stuff really has to do with that. However, I do have a corollary to that, which is I do think that if you don't use a pre-made engine, if you actually do finish a game, chances are it probably has a lot of love in it, right? Because in order to do all the work of making a game from scratch, it's a lot more work, right, than going and grabbing a pre-made engine. So it is probably the case that if someone made everything from scratch, you know there's a lot of love in there. Whereas if someone uses a pre-made engine, you don't know, right? Maybe there is, or maybe there isn't, and you'll have to go see, right? But, these days, certainly if someone's going to make a game from scratch, I think that is a labor of love, and that's kind of the proof is right there in it. Doesn't mean it's going to be a good game, but in terms of whether the person loved what they do, I think they have to in order to do that, because why wouldn't you just go buy, if all you're trying to do is get a game out there to make money or whatever, sure, go use a pre-made engine, why not? I mean, right? So I do think there is a little bit of a secondary correlation there that's sort of like handmade stuff probably has more love into it, just like in the real world. If someone, cooks a dinner from scratch, there's probably a lot more love in there than putting one in the microwave. I mean, that's just how that is. And, I don't know how to say it in any other way. But like I said, I think since even if you use a pre-made engine, I don't want to apply the microwave thing too liberally there, because even if you use a pre-made engine, it can be a ton of work to make a game, right? Like making all the art for it and that sort of stuff. There can be a ton of work that goes into that. So it can still be a labor of love even if you use a pre-made engine. That's not, that doesn't preclude it, which is why I say, while it may be more likely that the game had a lot of love behind it if it's made from scratch, it's certainly not in any way impossible for there to be a lot of love behind it when you use a pre-made engine. And we've seen that. I mean, I think you can easily go out there and find games that used pre-made engines where it was pretty clear that the people who made it really loved what they were doing. And, I mean, we know that's the case, right? That said, on to the second part, which is, do you not feel like reinventing the wheel may be a waste of time? I've answered that before on the stream, but obviously since you said this is your first time, you obviously haven't heard that. I am sort of, there's two sort of halves to the answer to that question, or rather, not really necessarily the answer to the question, but to explain to you sort of the mindset here. The first half is that this is an educational stream, so I'm not trying to make this game like as the most efficient business thing to do right now. I have a full-time job. I make games separate. Like this is not, this is something I do for people's educational benefit for an hour and a half every night. So that part is very important to consider. So when we do things on Handmade Hero, we're not stopping and saying at each point, would it be more efficient if I went and bought something or went and downloaded some code here and used it? Because the point of this stream is to be educational and teach people how to program all the parts of a game, like all of them. And so it's critical that we do each part by hand in order to fulfill that educational mission. And so that in and of itself precludes, even if I separate from the second part of the answer, which I'll give in a second, that part means we're definitely not going to be using anyone else's stuff on the stream, because the goal is to show how to do each part. And that, I think, has a tremendous amount of value regardless, because everything you use had to be built by someone and has to be maintained by someone. And so educating the next sort of group of people who will maintain the Unity engine, maintain the Unreal engine, who will make the next system for walk navigation or whatever, educating those people is of crucial importance if the people who don't know this stuff are ever going to have any good tools to use. So I think it's in everyone's best interest, even people who think that reinventing the wheel is a waste of time. I think it's very important to realize that some segment of the programming community has to engage in these activities. If they don't, you will have nothing to use, right, in 10, 20 years. There will be no one left who knows how to do it, who knows how to actually make the things you use. So I think it's pretty clear from the educational standpoint. Hopefully there's no argument there. It's just obvious that some segment of us have to be passing this knowledge on and working on these sorts of problems ourselves because engine teams always will have to exist. And although not every game developer has to have their own engine team, some set of game developers do, because they're the people who make the engines on which the world's games run. And that's something like 10 companies, 20 companies. I don't know how many companies maintain serious engines these days, but it's a fair number of them, right? And you're talking about thousands and thousands of programmers that need to know this stuff at the very minimum, right? Furthermore, as a sort of add-on to that question, or to that part of the answer, even if you don't ever build these things yourself, I think there's a tremendous amount of value in understanding how it works. Because even if you decide to use someone else's game engine, which a lot of people, probably should do, if you're using someone else's game engine, understanding how it works is crucial for you being able to get the most out of it. If you open up Unity or Unreal and you have no idea, you're just like, I don't know, I just know what it showed in the tutorials, I have no idea how graphics works, I have no idea how these things operate, then you're often going to find yourself in situations where you're very limited in what you can do, even in that pre-made tool, because you don't understand what's going on. And so there's also an educational benefit, even if you're never going to be an engine programmer, you're just going to be a gameplay programmer who always sits on top of this stack. Having that knowledge can be incredibly valuable, and it makes you a much more effective programmer if you can go, oh, all right, well, this is kind of messed up in Unity, but I know how these sorts of systems work. I can work around it this way, right? That's incredibly powerful thing for you to have at your disposal when you're working on a game, even in someone else's engine. And that goes double for things like Unreal, where you get the source code. I mean, you can go in there and fix things. You can go in there and see why something's not working. If you have the knowledge of how these things work, you're empowered to be a much more powerful game developer, on the programming side anyway, than if you didn't know them. So the second part of the answer as to whether I think, so taking it just at total face value, so let's assume that this was not educational, and the question is, do I feel like reinventing the wheel is a waste of time? My answer to that has kind of been said, like I said before on the stream. But the point I would really underscore there is there's an underlying assumption to that question. And the assumption is that somebody made a wheel at some point, right? It's kind of a very leading question, because if you think about what that means, you're equating today's game technology that you can go download or buy with one of the most fundamental and well-perfected inventions of human history, right? And so you're presuming we've hit a certain point of efficiency and elegance that I don't think we've actually hit. And so if I were to draw out what I think that question, if you actually apply it to the game industry, looks like, it's like someone showing me this. And being like, I don't understand why you're remaking wheels. We already have great wheels. Like, look at how awesome they are, right? And it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe if the roads you're driving on look like that all the time, that those are good wheels. But, in reality, my friend, roads look like this, and it's not so good, right? And so I think the sort of more realistic way of looking at the current state of game development is no one has anything even close to a wheel these days. I've certainly never seen one. Unity and Unreal and Source or whatever. These engines are so far from being in the category of wheel, like this thing can't even draw a good one. This is where we're at, and this is what we would like to have. So, I don't ever feel like making something from scratch these days is reinventing the wheel, because the wheel hasn't been invented yet, right? So what you're really doing when you make something from scratch, a component, a whole engine, whatever it is you're trying to invent the wheel. You're working on inventing the wheel, because nobody's invented a wheel, and, who knows, maybe you'll figure it out. And if you keep saying, don't try to reinvent the wheel because you think you have a wheel, well, what I can guarantee you is you'll never get a wheel. The easiest way to prevent yourself from ever inventing the wheel is to think you've already invented the wheel. But you haven't. I mean, trust me on this one. If you think that game development will look like booting up Unity in 50 years from now, there's no chance, right? We'll be so far past that as long as people do keep trying, which I think they will. I mean, Unity itself will keep trying, and so will Epic, and so will other people, and so will teams all around the world, right? So to me, I definitely think that development sort of falls into two categories. There's the category of trying to push the state of the art forwards, and that is necessarily from scratch programming. And then there's the idea of just trying to make a specific game, and that may have nothing to do with it, right? If that game does not require any improvements to the current technology, then you can do it without trying to invent new stuff. But I, for one, have always been a game technologist, so in my mind, I don't care about those games. And it's not that I don't want to play them, I do. I just don't want to make them, right? I'm not interested in making a game that anyone could just make with some off-the-shelf tools right now. That is a game I might want to play, because I'm a game player, so I do play games. So I like that people are doing it. But that's not what I want to work on during the day. What I want to work on at my job is technology that enables games we can't make today, right? And that's why I say, to me, it's never been a case of reinventing the wheel. It's a case of inventing the wheel. So that's really where the heart of this stream comes from, is that I would like to share that sort of, I guess, that love of technical programming that's about trying to build things yourself and see what you can do. I want to encourage that and share that with people who also want to do that. I'm not trying to convince someone who'd be perfectly happy making a game in Unity to do something else. If you are happy doing that, then that is what you should do. But if you have this desire to push the technology forwards, that's the person I'm trying to talk to, if that makes sense, or for whom this stream is designed. Now, on Handmade Hero, we don't drastically push the art of 2D games forwards at all, because it's an educational stream. So, I'm not trying to say that we're going to make some 2D engine that does things no one's ever seen before, although we have done some things already that are kind of new and novel. Like our loop live code editing was pretty great. We're doing some things with the entity system that are pretty interesting. So we are taking some places where we can show how to maybe try some things that haven't been tried before. But on an educational stream where you're programming on stream only an hour a night, we're not trying to push the envelope, certainly. But the idea is to show the act of programming at a serious technical level, so that after Handmade Hero, you've got your compulsories down. You understand how to build a game engine from scratch, all the parts. And so then, I hope that people will go out and become technology explorers from there. Because, once you've done the compulsories with me on the stream, now you have that basis to step forwards. So I also don't mean to suggest that Handmade Hero is going to have some kinds of crazy engine revelations in it. that again is also outside the scope of what I can do. But I do think what I can do is encourage people to learn those compulsories and then go out and do great work, right? And I think there are probably some people who, will do that. I didn't know if that would happen when I started, but based on sort of things I've seen come out of the community already, I think that's actually a goal that's sort of becoming realized, which is awesome. So that's kind of the entire answer to the question in a nutshell. I hope that gives you some better perspective on the idea. And just to clarify, yeah, so I do think, yeah, if your primary goal with making a game is just to make money, then you're definitely not making it with love, right? If a game is being made with love, then it means that your primary goal in life was to make that game, and that doesn't mean that you can't. That doesn't mean you can somehow do it without having money, right? You need money to survive. So you still sell the game and you still try to make money with it, certainly. I mean, you do everything you can to make sure the game makes money in the end so that you can keep doing what you love, right? So I'm not suggesting that you should give your games away for free or anything like that. Absolutely not. But yeah, your goal has to be that the reason you want money is to make games, not the reason you make games is to make money. Because if obviously that's at that point just a commercial product to you. It could have been anything. It doesn't have to be a game, it could be anything, right? And there's no love in that, except maybe loving money, which is a separate thing. And I've definitely done both kinds of work in the past. I've done work where I've been doing it strictly like this was a passion project, and I've done work where it's just like this was just it's what I was paid to do, and I did it, right? So it's also sort of a chaser on that is that it is in every real sense of the word a luxury to be able to make anything, not even just not even a game, but anything really. It's a luxury to be able to make it as a labor of love, right? Because human beings need to survive. You can't just make, and especially games which require a tremendous amount of money just to even have the equipment, right? I mean, you have to buy a computer to begin with is a very expensive piece of equipment, even just for starters, and the time and so on. So it's an honor a lot of times and a privilege certainly if you can do something as a labor of love. And I wish that that were not the case. I wish that everyone who had it in their heart to dedicate themselves to making something artistic like that had the capability to do so. But that's not the reality of the world we live in. So it's definitely always, if you do find yourself in a position where you can make something that you love and you have the financial stability to do that, that's really definitely kind of a real luxury, or it's a real privilege to be able to do that. So, all right, let me go ahead and close up shop. Okay, thank you everyone for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you would like to follow along at home, you can always pre-order the game on handmadehero.org, and it comes with a source code. So if you're someone who wants to tweak with the source code and play around with it, you can always do that. It's always available to you. The forums are also available. We've got a good site there where people answer your questions. So if you have questions about stuff we did on the stream or you're trying to follow along at home, that's the place to ask them. We have a Patreon page if you want to support the video series. Like I said, always available free of charge. So it's just if you're want to be a nice person and support us. We also have a schedule bot which tweets the schedule at you if you're trying to catch the stream live and know like when we're going to be on Twitch live, so that you can participate in the chat or ask questions. You can subscribe to that Twitter feed or just look at it on the page. And then we also have an episode guide made by the amazing Miblo, who it's just it's an incredible thing that he's done. It's basically all of our past episodes with time-coded markers. So you can actually see like what I worked on and what I talked about at each point in every episode. It's kind of remarkable when you look back at it. And so, you know, we're always very thankful to have him working on that. And he has a Patreon too you can subscribe to. For some reason, it still is not in big bold letters. You know, it's like here, right? And I keep saying, guys, there needs to be a giant button here because people use this thing. It should be like on every page. There should be a little like support this. Yeah. Oh, there. Oh, hey. I don't know why that's so dark, but at least that's there. Awesome. I'm really glad that's there. Because yeah, I just really wanted a way that people could support him, because basically like a lot of people use that episode guide, and you can support him by making a monthly pledge there. I transfer some of the Handmade Hero Patreon to him every month as part of his Patreon. It's like a little Patreon to Patreon route, because it's just a great service for everyone in the community. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. I will see you guys. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and I think I'm at 8 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time tomorrow. So I'll see you guys then. Until then, have fun programming, and I'll see you on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.